Yeah, we start with florals this month. And we've done a bunch of florals before. So it's in some parts it might seem like it could be a repetition of the same. But I'm hoping that there are some variations. And those of you who've done this a number of times before, if there's something else that you've thought of that you'd like us to explore, then we can add that as well to this whole month's um, program. So as usual, I want to start off with making pencil illustrations because I keep thinking that everyone's pencil sketching needs some work. And with pencil, the same things, the same parameters apply, which is how you hold the pencil, what kind of quality of line you draw, what kind of shading you do, how much control you have on pressure. So it's the same things. What I've found is the sketching of flowers somehow is very close to making portraits. A few things about flowers and faces I feel sometimes are very similar. The most important is the texture. This texture of skin and the texture of flower petals is very similar. So you need that same kind of softness and how the light bounces off petals. It's the same kind of way light bounces off our face. You might have a shadow in some places, have a certain highlight in some places, highlight in other places which stick out, and then you have certain shaded areas to give you depth. The advantage is that while you develop the ability to spot these differences and the strength and muscle control to accurately draw that on paper, you are not encumbered by making the flower look like the exact flower you see, which in the case of a face, the moment you draw a wrong line, everything goes south. When one shape goes off a little bit, the face can look dramatically different, and we get so embroiled in that um, the face looking wrong that we don't really focus on getting the rest of the shading or the other lines and other textures more accurately. So this way we can focus on the texturing, shading without worrying about the shape. Over time, the more florals you illustrate, when you come to making a face, you will not only be able to do the shading well, but you will start seeing spaces, distances, angles of lines much better any case. So you will be able to make facial features very easily, and you will wonder how it is that you're making this well enough without practicing faces as long as you think it might need to come to that level. But in this, I think works only for pencil sketching. It's not the same for pencil sketching and watercolor. When we paint flowers, they're often painted in a variety of styles, and mostly the ones that look most impressive or most compelling are a very loose watercolor style. So the whole joy of sending out watercolor on paper, doing all sorts of texturing, goes very well with the vibrance and the vivacity of flowers. So if we start painting faces the same way, then that doesn't work for faces. We need a certain accuracy, which then again is a separate aspect. So there are different things that we have to address. So today, the flowers that I have shared on the group, I'll just speak about the reason I have shared those flowers and what you can look for when you are looking at reference images for flowers to study from. These are peonies. They don't grow here, but they look very beautiful. I won't be too surprised if they grow in the north somewhere, and they have become pretty fashionable these days. Most most bouquets now include some peonies or another. Then, of course, we have the ubiquitous, I guess, rose, which can be very scary. Then you have the simpler flowers like sunflower, tulips, and again, a slightly scary flower when it comes to rendering in watercolor, the pansy. So all these flowers have a certain characteristic. The pansy has got very few petals, like the tulip, just 5 or 6 petals, and that does the job. In the sunflower, you have similar shapes for petals, and they are in a predictable um radial arrangement. So it's not mysterious. Then we come to the rose, which just seems like a spoiled brat of a flower. It has no rules, wants to do whatever it wants to do, and says that I'm still going to look gorgeous. And it does look gorgeous, probably because it doesn't follow any rules. But then trying to draw it can be a nightmare simply because none of the rules of other flowers apply. When we come to something like peonies, poppies, they too have unruly petals. They're often not the same kind of petal, but at least they are somewhere between roses and sunflowers, or roses and other flowers which follow the rule of a central core where you have the seed, and what's it called? There's a clubbed word for that, yeah. And then there are petals around. So somewhere between the rose and these other flowers, you will find the peonies, poppies. What else? There are quite a few like that. In the sunflower kind of family, you have dahlia, zinnia. Um, then you have daisies. Those also are in the same kind of category. With tulips, you have lilies, irises. They follow similar rules. And when it comes to pansies, you have things like even your what's it called? Your hibiscus often looks like it can be. It's just a 5 petal flower which follows simple rules. Replication of those petals works pretty well. So we're going to start off with sketching the pansy because I want to show you how to break everything down into basic shapes and then use that basic geometry to figure out how the structure of the flower works. That is one part. And the second part is the shading bit to translate color into an equivalent shadow in graphite. So in this case, the geometry of pansies is quite beautiful. I quite like it. It's not predictable, but it is at least consistent. Unlike the rose or even the sunflower to an extent, pansies have got some kind of consistent internal geometry. The lower 3 petals easily fit as part of a circle. If you run a line through the top center petals, you often find that they are pretty centrally aligned. So there's often a V-shaped dimple or indent in the bottom petal that runs straight through the center of the flower and can go all the way up, and you have these 2 V-shapes colliding with each other. Let me just show you those. So you have a V-shape here. And right below that, you have a V-shape for the bottom petal. So the attachment of the petals is pretty regular. Then if I were to draw a line perpendicular to this, the first line, across, so that you get a center vertical, center horizontal line, you start seeing also that there are the bottom petal also fits exactly in the bottom half in a very regular shape. So something like that can help you at least get to starting points of the petal shapes. Every point that you see can be plotted on a geometric shape like that. Where does the bifurcation of the top petals begin? It begins somewhere at, let's say, 1/3 or so in the top half. So this is where it starts from, right? Where does the petal for the bottom petal turn down? At maybe half, and here maybe at just a little less than half. So you know where to turn the line down from. At what point does that bifurcation happen? Between the two petals, it's somewhere after 8 o'clock, and in this case, around 4 o'clock orientation of the circle. And similar such things. One petal comes at 11 o'clock, one petal comes at 1 o'clock. So you start seeing all sorts of shapes here. Then at the same junction where this petal on the right is turning around, the same point, you have the petal in the back going outward. And then just after 2 o'clock, you have the fifth petal going out. How tall does this petal go? You can measure this, the height. Sorry, I'll choose a different color. The height of this petal is probably 1/2 of the top half. So this distance is about as far as you take the top petal outward. If we don't see this, it happens often that we think it's a big petal and you'll end up making that petal all the way till here, and that flower just starts looking very too disproportionate compared to the reference image. So I'm making all these reference points just so that you know what to look for. And then when I draw it, I will refer to the lines or the color of the line so you know what I'm looking at. So in a similar fashion, I can draw another circle in the center of this circle. So I know how far I have to draw the white portion of the flower. Try to keep this a circle. And that is also just around 1/3 of the radius. I have never done so much geometry even when I was studying in school. But I'm telling you, this works so well. I'll share a screenshot of this flower, so you always have it as reference. And I would encourage you to see more points of reference within this geometry so that you don't feel at a loss. Once you know where to draw the line, that's half the job done. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the same structures. You can, if you want, just observe how I'm plotting everything. I'll be drawing the line a lot darker than you need to draw, because ideally you don't want to erase those lines at all. Just make them fairly light so that when you shade it, those reference lines often will just get hidden. Any place where you want to draw vertical lines, you really don't need to draw an entire vertical line. That's something that I often recommend kids should do because they don't know how to see a broken straight line. But as far as we are concerned, when you draw a circle and you want to mark the center of the circle, you can just draw one line at the top, one line somewhere in the middle, which is slightly long, and one line right at the bottom. So you know between these three lines that it's a straight line, likewise horizontally, so that center, those lines can get obscured in the shading and you don't really have to use an eraser. But if you're not confident, you can definitely try drawing the whole line also. I will be drawing the whole line, and at some point, the straight lines I'm going to be erasing because they will interfere with the shading otherwise. Okay, let me share the picture with you on the group. Now, when you're drawing this, the basic form, just ignore the flower. You don't need to really look at the flower so much. We are not going to draw a very big flower. Draw a pretty tiny flower. So this is the circle. I'm drawing mine much darker than I normally do because otherwise it won't be visible on screen. Leave enough room on the top and bottom so that it does not, your petals don't go off. In fact, you can bring it even lower, keep about 2 or 3 fingers space on all sides. Now, the angle of the flower in the reference image is sideways, but as long as the geometry remains the same, you can also convert it to make it straight. I'm continuing to make it sideways so that you can keep referring to the main image. Now divide this into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. Here I'm dividing it into half and half. I'm going to draw a circle-like shape right in the center. And then about the distance of this circle, I'm going to make a mark over here for the final petal here. And at about halfway along this angle, at the same level, maybe 1/3, it's a little less than 1/3 or 2/3. I'm going to make a spot for the petal on the right. Now these lines, some of the lines that I've drawn are only for observation. You don't have to plot every line until it is needed. Now, according to this circle, the absolute center of the flower is a little to the right. So you have a V shape at this 1/3 level, coming more to the right than to the left. From here, you have that petal going straight out, turning a little inward here, then turning down, and then turning further down. So I'm looking at the direction the lines take. The distance the line goes. In some ways, the angle, it is the same as direction. So direction can be left, right, top, bottom. Angle can be, is it going towards 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock? It's a minor distinction, but direction essentially means the same. I'm just breaking it up a little bit. And at every point, you will get some cue. Now, from here, where do I see the line going? It goes to about this distance inside the circle, then goes upward, and then goes straight up and comes and joins this point over here. So you will be able to draw this without even having to draw a continuous shape. Then on the top, again, there will be an angle to how the V on top is. Is it a narrow V? Is it a wide V? So I don't want to have to break all of these things down, but essentially that is what you need to look out for. I'm pretty sure you will get it. Often what I found, the problem starts with not asking the right questions. So in many cases, as beginners, the problem is that one doesn't know where to begin. So that is one problem. So if I say, okay, start the flower from the center. Now you get a location to begin from. So you have a location to observe and start drawing. But then when you start drawing, the problem is, how do I know where to draw the next line? Or how do I draw the line from that starting point to where is the next point? So essentially what you have to do in drawing is just say, I have to draw one line and then another line and then another line. And if I know how far I have to go, what distance I have to go, what angle I have to take, that's all you need to to complete the drawing. So these are the same questions that you can ask yourself. Look at the line, and what you see is what others are seeing as well. And in many cases, if you don't think too much, you should be able to get the right shapes, the right angles, and everything should work perfectly fine. Okay, have you all got this? Okay, Madhuja, how are you doing? Now, from this point on, you can start shading. I have drawn some lines sufficiently light, so I'm not going to erase those. But some parts I might erase just because I don't want it interfering with the actual shading. I don't need this. Yeah, these markers can go. And the reason I'm keeping these lines is because I want you to see how, in many cases, your erasing is not really necessary. Now, when we're shading this, go to the original flower. Don't look at the grid because the grid is obscuring certain details. You know where all elements are going to be. So at this point, you can start shading. For shading, you just need a tonal variation. So start light, layer, and keep adjusting. So how light or how dark you make each layer depends upon the neighborhood. If you have a very light neighborhood, then even a slightly dark shade will do. If the colors are very deep, then you need to add more depth. But you don't need to decide that right at the beginning. Keep rotating the book. And contour shade. A contour shading is when you use the shape or the silhouette of the shape that you are shading and continue in that same line. So the contour over here would be, if this is the silhouette, I would continue to go round at that point and then radially, because here it is straight. And then as I come to the bottom, I might also turn it the other way around. This is the light shade that I have made here. And I'll continue to make the same shade on the right. Now, in this case, I am shading just back and forth. I'm just barely touching my pencil to paper. And you'll immediately notice how the petal on the left is looking much flatter than the petal on the right. Because here I've just shaded the lazy shade, just going back and forth without caring for contouring. Now, the fact that I'm going to layer afterwards makes this okay. It's much easier to shade back and forth than contour, but that can at best be just the first layer. Okay, now just a little suggestion. Since we are working with pencil, I would advise you to keep a little guard sheet around. Just some old paper or a small card that you can keep your hand on so that the grease of your hand does not constantly erase, smudge your pencil shading. Now, after you've done one basic layer, you will start noticing that in some places, even in that color, you have a dark or light. At this point, you can start adding this second layer, but you should not make it dark in one shot. My advice is to go gently over and over and over again so that you can keep an eye on how much graphite is being deposited in that area. At this stage, it will help to pay attention to the direction of line. Many floral textures have directional lines. So you have to really peer into the structure of the petal to identify that. And at every point, you have to make sure that you are keeping that intact. Now, as I'm coming to the bottom of this petal, if I don't look at the reference image, I might be tempted to take this very low thinking that this is a radial design. But actually in the reference image, the line goes straight out from here. It doesn't go all the way down immediately. It starts turning downward only towards the bottom. And these little details are, when clubbed together, make your illustration convincing or not. When I'm shading, I often, well, not often, I never rotate the pencil. I'm trying to keep the pencil always in the same orientation so that one edge of the pencil constantly keeps getting used and it starts becoming blunt. So I'm able to make a very nice overlapping structure of these graphite lines that then give me a smooth finish without the need for blending. There's a little white edge along the petal. You should be able to control your pencil to make a slightly darkish edge, a little inside the edge of the flower, but it's not throughout. Some places it's still colored. There is a color there, but it's just not as deep. It could just be a highlight. Now, this adjusting thing is often not given attention. As you start filling in more and more details, you will start noticing the accuracy of your illustration. And there's a chance that some shapes might not be truly accurate. Like in this case, there was a nice little curve on this petal, which I have not respected. I've just gone and made it round. And that's because I did not see it because it was behind that circle and therefore I wasn't able to draw it. But I can make one part properly, and that is possibly the top of the petal comes inward a little bit. And there's a little extra shape out here. That might look good. When you have to draw sharp lines, just use the central tip of the pencil, which will already have become sharp from all that grinding. And I can also do one thing like this. I can manipulate the shape. And just by darkening that edge, I have now changed the shape. So I've just omitted, I've left out outside the part of the circular part that I didn't want. That's all. So this adjustment can be done in shape, in shade, in tones, texture, and you must keep doing it. That's how your illustration will evolve. That's again a beginner problem I have seen. Once you've drawn the pencil line, there seems to be this compulsion to adhere to that line. You need to, a lot of people cling to that line as if it's a line in stone. Sometimes it could be that because I've asked you not to erase, you feel compelled to cling to that line, but that's not necessary. You can always make tiny adjustments. When you are making the shape of these lovely marks in the center, don't just make them ad hoc. Look at the shape. They are triangular. And it matters a lot that you maintain that shape and the placement and the depth of the color as translated into pencil. Now, when I'm doing this shading, I have changed the orientation of my flower. This can be a tricky situation. I wouldn't recommend it for all applications. Like now in this case, I want to make my lines radial. Over here, for right-handed people, making a line that goes from bottom left to top right, back and forth, is very easy to do. You can, top to bottom is also very easy. But this line, which goes from top left to bottom right, is very difficult for right-handed people. It could be very easy for left-handed people, just by the fact that we hold our pencil in a certain manner. So in this case now, after you have made the first layer, then when you have to make the second layer, and actually you have to rotate the flower, if you want to be on the safe side, I would recommend rotating the reference image also. Because then you are not imagining anything. You should not have to imagine how something looks. So I'm just going to share this. This is what I'm looking at now. Now, when you turn your reference image around, notice that you get another perspective on your shapes. So here's another opportunity to crisp them up a little bit, change some sizes, and check that you've got all your lines correct. Just out further. And now it becomes easy for you to sketch. I cannot overstate the importance of looking at the reference image at all times, between lines, constantly. All the information is there. It's impossible to note everything down in one shot and then sketch away. So many times I've seen in the live classes, when I can observe the process of the students also, that the images on the phone, and they're merrily shading away where the phone has gone off after whatever 5 minutes or 3 minutes. And when I ask them, okay, where is your reference image? They don't even know where their phone is. So they are so involved in shading or doing something to their illustration without even knowing why they're doing it. And before you know it, they've shaded an area too much or shaded in the wrong place. And then they want to erase. So this idea that they can erase works against them. I think I got into the habit, apart from the school, I got into the habit of not shading almost as a challenge, where I told myself how I should be able to illustrate a portrait and no ordinary portrait. I decided I'm going to sketch the Mona Lisa in a thumbnail size. I don't know why Mona Lisa. I think it was just one of those things. Now when you're asked what famous artist do you know, everybody knows only two: Picasso and Leonardo da Vinci. And we don't know why we know them, but we just know them. So I thought, okay, if that is the epitome of quality art, because others say so, I'm going to try and emulate the same. But I'm going to add my own level of difficulty because my life is not miserable enough. And it wasn't actually. I lived a very good childhood. So I could take on completely unnecessary challenges. Okay, now here's some instruction, and maybe a little late, but at this point now you can evaluate how you are shading and how you could be shading. Our normal hold of the pencil is pretty close when we are writing words. But when you're shading, you should be able to hold the pencil pretty far away because you're not required to make very firm lines. So automatically, the pressure reduces. Also, when you move your hand away from the tip of the pencil, you see more of your illustration. So, since we are making lines pretty fast, you know where the next line should be headed, which won't happen if you hold the pencil too close. This helps you see the geography of your illustration much better. Changing directions also becomes a lot easier without too much effort when your hand is far away. If your hand is over here, then you need to move pretty cumbersome. This is, I think that seventh standard science or eighth standard physics, fulcrum and arm and work and all. I was fascinated by that. It was just basic logic, but so well explained. So because your movement is very low, you can control the pressure. I should write a book, The Physics of Art. Because it is really fascinating how understanding a few things may speed up the process of your of art for you. Now, when you have multiple colors, like the orange in the center, then you have this dark splash of blue, and then you have another dark blue coming. It can be a little disorienting, very psychedelic. The whole point is that the flower has been constructed this way to mesmerize the pollinator, and they just get drawn into the center of the flower, and before they know it, they're hooked and they have pollinated it, and that's the job. But because that is the intention, that whole mesmerizing works for us as well, and we start losing our measurements over here. So it helps, at least it helps me to talk this out. So I say to myself, I have an orange, blue, white, blue sequence. So here is orange, then I have a blue, and I will draw a few lines over there to make that shape. And then I have white, and then I have blue again. And I'll keep saying this: orange, blue, white, and blue. This may not be the case with everyone, but I often find that just talking and constantly saying this helps me figure out what I am to do at what point. And then once you have done one basic form, like I've done part of the blue, and I'm deliberately making a little narrow because, as you can see, my disorientation has made me shade a lot more into the white space than I should have. I'm going to make an adjustment so that at least some portion of the white remains white. And then I'm going to also shade from a little far away, creating the illusion of a lighter edge on the top. This is just adjustment so that my flower doesn't look too disproportionate and too different from the original. There will still be this gray line because I refuse to erase. But I want you to see that even without erasing, the moment you find that there is a problem and you can make an adjustment, start making the adjustment. It's the same rule that applies for everything. If you realize that on the way when you left home and you wanted to go to Delhi, if you find yourself heading towards Bangalore, then the sooner you correct your course, the better it is. But getting back on track will still require some time. But give yourself that time. But the adjustment has to be made. Ah, see here again, I missed out. So like I spoke about rotating your picture when shading, another thing that you should avoid doing, at least at the initial stage of drawing, is enlarging the reference image to observe details. When you are drawing, looking at the proportion of lines is very vital. So when you draw, let's say you draw the petals, but you can't see the center properly, and you choose to enlarge the image just to get that detail without drawing a single shape in the center over here. What you'll end up seeing is a much bigger central portion, and you forget that you've already created the periphery of that area. And that leads to, again, a disproportionate illustration of that part. And then, of course, as a result of the whole illustration. So avoid rotation unless you can rotate the reference image also, and avoid enlarging till you have finished the drawing part. Once that is done, then you can enlarge. But again, with enlarging, it's not fair on yourself when you enlarge an image, because you are you're able to see a detail which is impossible to render often in an illustration of a smaller size. So effectively, when you enlarge an image that on your phone you see at maybe 2 inches across, and you enlarge just the center portion so that that becomes 2 inches, at that scale, the flower should be 10 inches or more. 10 inches is about this big. If you're going to make a flower this big, then the details of that small center really matter. Otherwise, they don't. So where to enlarge should be thought about. Don't just enlarge for the sake of it, just because you can. Oh, this reminds me. Before I forget, in second week of Jan, did I tell you about this? I'm planning a retreat to Mahabeshwar. I think I spoke about this in last class, yeah? So the dates are 10 to 14th of Jan, tentatively. And I'm sending out that message later today in the evening, just to get a sense of how many people would be interested, because I need to book at the club. I think only your batch knows about this. The other batches I failed to mention. Maybe because on Saturdays, suddenly I remember what is the next thing I have to do. Okay, how are everyone's flowers looking? Are you happy with them? I'm going to stop the flower here because I want to now spend some time on the rose. But I'll give you another 2-3 minutes if you're in the middle of something so that you complete that task. And unless you have any queries, I think you should be able to complete the rest of the flower by yourself. How's it looking? All good? Okay, let's see Susan's. Okay, good shape. All right. Susan, are you lifting your hand when you are shading? Do you tend to be lifting, or are you going back and forth? Okay. Could you, okay, maybe it's not clear on screen. Would you mind sharing
I'll
this?
take a photo.
Yeah, I think that will be the case with everyone. Yeah, please share it on the group. Yeah. Alka, your structure is also good. Shading is also good, but I think shading can be a little darker. Madhuja, can I have a look? Yeah, shading can be a little darker. And these lines over here, notice how they're the same distance from the center on the left as well as on the right. So you can make that adjustment. All right. Okay. Now, once you're done, after a few hours, you'll close your book right now. And then when you come back to it, when you see this, look at it again and look at the reference image. You will see things differently. At that point, notice the stuff that you have done correctly first. That I know that's a tougher task to do. What is not right is what you tend to see first. But push that aside. Those points are also important. But focus on what you have got right. The stuff that you will compare are the usual ones: shape, size. So each individual size and in proportion to each other. Placement. And then you also pay attention to these things. Did you get the direction of these lines? Okay. Did this so-and-so line go straight, or was it going slightly to one side, or so-and-so? So go over all these. Did I get the distance right? Did I get the angle right? In the shading, are some places lighter? This is light-handed. Did I get the contrast right? In this flower, there is extreme contrast between the blue on the lower petals and the white and the dark lines that we see. Oh dear. No. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, so the contrast that you see is darkest over here. The dark color of the petals, the dark directional lines over here. They're almost like emphasis lines. But in a few places, if you notice, even in my illustration, I can go much darker in some areas. This is a little scary, I know, but do it. We can go much deeper than we have. As long as we do it smoothly, it will work. So don't jab your pencil in and murder it or under threat of murder shade. It's still just gently encouraging it to do a little more and it'll perform very well. And instantly your whites will shine. You can use the tip of your pencil also to fill in a few white spots. Because the paper is textured, you might not be able to get a nice thick dark space simply because the pencil is not going there, the flattened pencil. So you can make that a little darker by turning the pencil upright, holding it slightly closer, and then filling in those details. I have had to do this on a lot of student work when everything else was right. That fear of dark shading makes their
Aditi, can you recommend pencils, size and quality of pencil for
A
shading?
regular 2B pencil should work. Now, Camlin has got this very interesting smooth and dark pencil. I was given this when I did that workshop with them in Bombay, and they've just introduced these. But you have things like Apsara Dark, or I have something called Yuhu. It's a black colored pencil. Otherwise, a proper artist's 2B or 4B pencil is also good. 4B pencil can be a little scary when you're drawing because it can become very dark suddenly. So draw with a 2B pencil because you need it smooth and shade with 2B and then 4B. All right. Shall we move to the rose now? Okay, one second. Let me see everyone's flowers. This is Susan's. Yeah, again, we need to make it darker. And Susan, there is a very distinct V shadow or inverted V shadow here. I think you will be able to make that. So it's not just a circle. It looks like this. It's almost like a cave opening. You'll see in the center of the flower.
Yeah, yeah.
This is Alka's. Yeah, looking good. Alka, but you can also do a medium tone now. So dark is not your problem, but a medium tone along the outside would be good. So all other flowers also, I'll just quickly go over them so we can see what kind of internal geometry you could have with that. I'll make the grid and I'll share the image so that you can try sketching those also. This sunflower, I think, is meant for table decorations. So it has a different geometry than sunflowers, which are grown for oil seeds. The center of the flower is much smaller. Only when I draw the vertical, horizontal lines, I will know what is the proportion of the central circle. So maybe the center circle is at 1/3 of the radius. And then, of course, we have all the directions of the petals. The significant petals are the big ones. They're usually at the predictable points. You have some of them all on the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock radius, and then some in between. So this becomes an easy enough replication. Oh, I'll have to get... With the tulip again, you can make your own. Either you start with a circle, or many flowers you can start with a circle or oval. Oval I don't recommend because you can't control an oval. You don't know how wide versus how tall. But circles are circles. They're very simple. Same thing. Draw a line through the center. You don't really need a line, horizontal line, but just to break up the center line so you get a radius. This will tell you that the petal on top is shorter than the radius by maybe it's at 2/3 of the radius. And you get directions of the petals from the bottom, not from the center.
Excuse me.
And then you can use whatever reference points you need to draw the rest of the petals. I'll use another color so you can see it better. And then, of course, the shapes and where those petals come and meet the center of the circle. Now, when it comes to the rose, all this geometry goes out the window because we may at best just be able to make some kind of circle. And say, okay, maybe this part is in a circle or this part is in the circle. And I'm genuinely going to try and see if we get some reference points from our earlier technique. So you got the circle. The center line. I'm extending a little bit so that I get better measurement. Center vertical, center horizontal. And then it's just a matter of where everything fits in. I can use the same technique, of course, and mark where the petals go, what direction they take, where do they come and meet other parts of the circle, so on and so forth. So it's not as if this technique does not work at all, but it seems a little tedious and it seems like we're using a different formula or a formula for a problem that could have a simpler solution. Oops, sorry. The way I draw this, and I found a nice way of drawing it, and other flowers like roses, is to identify the one factor which remains in the front or the foreground without any overlaps, without anything coming and disturbing it. Whether it is roses, chrysanthemums, to some extent, even the peonies and poppies, there will be something that's in the front that is unencumbered. And in this case, it's this shape, this petal. Don't look at it as a petal because you might feel that this is hardly a petal. This is just a flap. But that is the shape that can become your unit measure. How does it do that? Let's say in this shape, just find one line that you can draw. We can start off with this horizontal line. And then using the same thing, figure out what direction the line takes, what distance it goes at what angle. It turns up, goes towards 1 o'clock, about the same distance as the horizontal, turns towards 3, and then comes down. 2/3 down the vertical part, it turns in, then goes around the corner, then goes down, and then follows almost parallel and comes and joins the line back. This is the structure. Now, once this becomes your unit, everything springs forth from here. You will have one petal that has come out 1/3 of the way up the slope, another half the way up the slope. At the same point, there's a swirl. You have this line come in, from where you get this line go out, and it comes and joins this line. So you start seeing the references. Here there's a double line. Of course, you have an outer side, inner side. And again, how far does it go? It does not go beyond the start of the blue line. And then it turns right up. What angle does it take? Maybe about 10 o'clock. So do you see all the reference images are right, reference points are right here. And you should be able to draw one line after another by measuring it for distance, direction, and angle of the previous line that you've drawn and build on that. Okay, so we're going to try drawing this. I won't share this as a spotlight, as a screenshot, because I don't think you need it. Okay, let's give it a shot. Okay, I have to reconnect. Just give me a minute, I'll be back. I know you all have already started, but there's one point I forgot to tell you. Before you start, just always check how large your starting element is. We tend to start making that element much bigger than it's necessary. It almost becomes the full size of the flower that we want often. So use your fingers to figure out if this is the size of the flower I want. This is that internal circle. Forget the petals outside. Then only in this bottom part, I have that, the first petal that I'm going to draw. And I don't land up drawing it this big just because that's the first thing I'm drawing on the flower. When you're drawing these lines also, because this is a rose, make them very light and wispy. They don't have to be very firm lines. Often with petals of roses, you have, because there's a fold, you will see part of the inside and the fold and the outside edge also. But the inside part is not the end of the petal. So it often you will find that some part of it comes out. And then you have it go into shadow and then nothing at all. That can also lead to some confusion. So the best bit is to first draw the edges of the petal. I have this edge here and I have the internal edge of that petal, no shadows, goes all the way till here. And then the line just ends because the external line takes over the edge. Where you can't see a line, don't draw a line. Let that part just be. Like over here, I see this line, that's the internal line of the petal, go towards the inside, but it just stays there. And then I have the external edge. Come out this way. Some places you don't know whether it's the same petal that continues or another one. If you can't see that there's a separation or whether it's the same one, just don't draw that junction at all. Just let it be. It doesn't matter. The brain will fill in the details and you'll notice that that detail was not really very pertinent in the first place. Direction, distance. Now, the other thing about distance is also not just about the line, but distance from other objects. Or other elements. With the rose, once you finish drawing the center part, you can zoom in to see the details, because just a few lines over there will help you complete the image. Otherwise, it'll just look like a vacuum. You wouldn't know what to shade. You don't want to do that. So when you have a very light colored flower, ideally only start with shading the shadows. Don't even bother making an all over shade, because with every illustration that you make, there is a purpose of that illustration. There is something that you want to showcase about the item or object that you are illustrating. In this case, I would think that the peach color represents or looks like a very delicate shade of, oh no, a delicate side of roses. It's not an aggressive rose color. So then in that case, the soft shadows will make that clear. But if we shade the entire flower, then it might just look too, it won't translate as peach, I would think. Shading in light tones is much more difficult than shading dark tones or high contrast. Here you have to be extra careful that you don't land up shading anything too dark. My shadows become a little too deep. At this point, I'm sure you feel you want to use the paper stump. Let me get mine. Let's see how this looks. Okay, how are everyone's roses looking? This will take some time to finish. But a very nice Saturday activity to look forward to if you have the time. Oh, you went in with color pencil? Great. Nice. Now, in this case, Susan, with color pencils also, you could give another thing a try.
Hmm.
How many shades are you using right now? One or two?
Just one. Just one.
Okay. So this is standard, but what you could try also is to make it a little more funky. So though the reference image is a nice classic rose, I'm sure you can handle that. But to challenge yourself, maybe try adding a second color to this and maybe add a contrasting color. So maybe even a blue in the darker areas and see what kind of effect that gives you. Because then you can start doing something that is not regular. That will open doors for other possibilities, either other colors or other topics and rendered in a completely different manner. Yeah. Okay, good, but it's looking lovely. This can make for a nice sticker.
It will. I know.
Cool. Okay, so next week we'll take up watercolor flowers. We'll start off with the usual loose watercolors. Then I would really like to do something a little more serious, a good botanical illustration with details. Then somebody in the Tuesday batch has requested that we do bouquets again. So in the third week, I'll make bouquets in vases. It might take us more than one class to do those because there are little elements that I would like to cover and then put them all together into a bouquet. So that's
Since it's a festive month, can we make some Indian garland or lotus or for making cards and something? It will
yeah.
help.
Certainly. If you can send some reference images, then I can just study a little bit and see.
Yeah.
This is something that I'm terrible at, making Indian flowers and cards for Indian festivals. I don't know why I can't do it. My cards just look horrible. But at
Maybe if
least
we can try some kind of a graphic design pattern rather than an actual flower,
uh-huh.
use maybe lotus or marigold or something, not right.
Element. Yeah, not
Yeah.
realistic one.
eh,
Yeah, that will look interesting.
So
We
do
can try
maybe
that.
some negative painting or, something, use more of a design element rather than a live representation kind of.
Yeah, we could try that. Let me try that. Let's see. Give me. That's my Achilles heel. But I don't mind giving it a shot. Send me. I'd love to see that.
So maybe like, flowers like champa, marigold, lotus,
Yeah.
very typically in hibiscus.
Yeah.
So very typically flowers that we use for Indian this thing.
Right. So hibiscus is okay, but that was for Ganesh festival, so that's
Ah.
going now. But marigold, somehow just that marigold doesn't work. I've had a couple of commissions. So they have liked the picture, but I've never been happy with it. There's something about the composition with marigolds that I'm not happy with, but I can work on it. So marigolds, lotus is also possible. I love making lotuses in almost like the miniature painting fashion because then all the colors can be very well earthy.
Aditi, even the aboli has a very interesting arrangement of petals. The orange aboli. It's a
Yeah,
tiny flower, but the arrangement of petals is really pretty.
yeah. Maybe I should try that. We can if you can just look for these images and share them, we'll see what we can put them together. And also as garlands. So not just individual flowers, some interesting shaped garlands that we can translate into graphics or put them on cards or something. Let's see, we can try doing that. Okay. Chalo, I'll see you next week then. Bye.
All right.
Bye,
Bye.
bye everyone.